I've been with my husband for 7 years now, and our journey has been anything but smooth, mostly thanks to my mother-in-law. The first big clash came when she invited my husband's ex, Sam, to our son's gender reveal party. That was bad enough, but she'd also had the nerve to tell me that she'd never love me as much as she loved Sam. That was the beginning of the end of my patience with her. In the early days of our relationship, when we were both still in high school, things were already off. My mother-in-law would have Sam stay over at her place every other day, even after they broke up. It was beyond awkward. Sam would sleep in my mother-in-law's bed, while my husband and I stayed down the hall. It felt like some twisted reality show. My father-in-law was rarely around due to work, so he had no clue what was going on. Eventually, my husband told his mom that her behavior was making us both uncomfortable. Her response: "This is my house, I can have whoever I want over. If you don't like it, leave." So we did. With our minimum wage jobs, we moved into a tiny studio apartment that cost us $1,800 a month. My own mother didn't support our relationship, so moving in with her wasn't an option. I didn't realize at the time how much it must have hurt my husband that his own mother preferred his ex over him. But things only got worse. Every day, on his way home from work, his mom would call asking for favors, whether it was buying groceries or cleaning her house. When my husband grew tired of her constant demands, I offered to pick up the groceries so he could go straight home for once. Big mistake. When I showed up at her door, she was furious. She didn't want me there, she wanted her son. She even told me to take the groceries and leave. I was livid. My husband decided to stop visiting her for a couple of weeks after that incident, but she quickly played the victim, claiming she was starving and her house was falling apart. My husband suggested she ask Sam to help her out since she was always around anyway. The truth is, my mother-in-law could easily take care of herself, she just chose not to. Every time we visited, Sam was there. It didn't matter what day or time it was, she'd always be there. When I finally confronted my mother-in-law about how uncomfortable it made me, she brushed me off, saying she saw Sam as a daughter and would never love me as much. I kept trying to win her over, offering to help around the house, but she just rejected me time and time again. My husband, feeling obligated, would still ask me to help out, so I did, even though it meant enduring her snarky comments. We eventually cut our visits down to twice a month, even though we lived just 5 minutes away. During COVID, I grew closer to my sister-in-law, and we started talking more. One day, I opened up to her about how our mother-in-law treated me. To my surprise, she told me she'd gone through the exact same thing, even having to deal with Sam at family gatherings. That was my wake-up call. I realized I was reliving her nightmare, and I didn't want my kids to experience the same. In 2021, I became pregnant with our son. My husband and I started looking for a venue for the gender reveal, but my mother-in-law insisted we do it at her house. We reluctantly agreed, and of course, she invited Sam. The whole event was ruined for us. We spent the entire time trying to focus on our actual friends and family, while Sam acted like she belonged there. It was infuriating. A few months later, I decided to extend an olive branch. I was at Lowe's and called my mother-in-law to see if she needed anything. She asked for orchid mulch, so I brought it over and offered to help plant it. She declined, saying she'd wait for Sam to do it. 3 months later, Sam finally planted the orchids. My mother-in-law complained constantly about not seeing our son, but refused to come to our apartment, claiming her asthma couldn't handle our air conditioning. We gave her the benefit of the doubt and started visiting her more often. During one of these visits, my husband was outside washing down the backyard while I was inside trying to get our son to sleep. My mother-in-law took the opportunity to insult me, calling me fat and saying my husband would leave me for any woman who could cook and smile at him. When I didn't react the way she expected, she accused me of having an affair. I became pregnant with our daughter not long after, and once again, we looked into renting a gazebo for the gender reveal. The prices had gone up, and my mother-in-law offered her house again. This time, I flat out refused. She shamed me, saying I didn't love my daughter as much as I loved my son. My husband finally told her the truth, that we didn't want to use her place because she had invited Sam last time. Her response? "This is my house, I can invite whoever I want. We ended up doing a virtual gender reveal instead, and she was livid that it didn't go her way. At this point, we only see her on Christmas, and she comes over maybe once in a blue moon. A few months ago, she told my husband that she's grown to love me now. My husband wants me to fix things with her. But I'm tired of trying to please her, tired of her manipulative behavior, and tired of the whole situation. I talked to my husband about how I feel, and he told me I need to get over it, that I'm stuck in the past. But this wasn't just the past, it was last year. I told him I couldn't trust her, not after 7 years of consistent mistreatment. He insisted that she's changed, that she's seen how good of a mother I am, and that's why she's grown to love me. But that's not how love works. Love is earned through actions and genuine care, not because someone sees you doing what you're supposed to do as a parent. I'm at my wit's end. I'm considering showing my husband this entire situation in black and white. Hoping it might make him see the light, I decided to give my mother-in-law one last chance, despite all my reservations. When I arrived at her house, she greeted me with a forced hug. As she went to the kitchen to prepare some snacks, I followed to help out. That's when I overheard her laughing on the phone, calling me stupid, and bragging about how the cookies she was about to serve were from Sam. She didn't realize I was standing right behind her, and I managed to record the whole conversation. I left her house without a word. When I got home, my husband asked why I left so suddenly. Apparently, my mother-in-law had already texted him, claiming I was being spiteful and rude. That's when I showed him the video. He was furious. He confronted her, shouting loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. Meanwhile, I blocked both her and Sam's numbers. They had started spamming me with messages, and I was done. When my husband came back inside, he apologized, admitting he should have known better. I don't blame him, she's his mom after all. But as of today, we're officially going no contact with her. It's a relief, honestly. For the first time in a long time, I feel like we're finally on the same page about this toxic situation. My mother-in-law invited my husband's ex to my son's gender reveal and had the audacity to tell me that she would never love me as much as she loved her. That was the breaking point for me. I decided to start recording all the awful comments she made about me and showed them to my husband, updating him along the way. We've been together for 7 years now, but the tension with his mother has always been a thorn in our relationship. I remember the early days of my relationship with my husband. It was our senior year of high school, and his mother would have his ex-girlfriend, Sam, sleep over every other day. Even after they broke up, Sam was still a frequent guest in their home. My husband would invite me over to sleep, seeking some peace of mind. It was beyond bizarre. Sam would sleep in his mother's bed, while my husband and I would be in the room down the hall. His father was rarely home due to his job, so he had no idea what was going on. When my husband finally told his mother that having Sam sleep over made us both uncomfortable, she responded coldly, "This is my house. I can have whoever I want over. If you don't like it, you can leave." And that's exactly what we did. We moved out, leaving behind the toxic environment she created. With our minimum wage jobs, we could only afford a tiny studio apartment with $1,800 rent. My own mother refused to take us in since she wasn't supportive of our relationship in the first place. At that time, I was furious with my mother-in-law, not realizing how much her behavior must have hurt my husband. Imagine how it felt for him to see his mother prefer his ex over him. The situation only worsened over time. Every day on his way home, his mother would call, asking for some favor, buying groceries, cleaning up a mess, you name it. Eventually, my husband got tired of being at her beck and call. He just wanted to come straight home for once. So, I offered to pick up the groceries for her so he could have a break. When I showed up at her door with the groceries, my mother-in-law was livid. "Why are you here? Where is my son? I don't want you here. Get that trash and go. I don't need it." I was stunned but managed to reply, "As per your son's request, I'm dropping this off for you." I left her house infuriated, and my husband refused to go to her house for the next 2 weeks. She quickly played the victim card, claiming she had no food or drink, and that her house was falling apart without his help. My husband responded bluntly, telling her that Sam could easily get groceries and clean for her. After all, my mother-in-law was perfectly capable of driving and cleaning on her own. Yet, Every time she invited us over, Sam was there too, always. It was clear she was doing it on purpose. I finally pulled my mother-in-law aside and told her how uncomfortable it made me feel. She didn't care. She told me that she saw Sam as a daughter and would never love me as much, so I had to accept it. Despite her coldness, I continued to offer my help, thinking that maybe, just maybe, she'd come around to accept me. But every time, she rejected me and made snarky comments, complaining about everything I did. We slowly reduced our visits to twice a month, even though we lived only 5 minutes away. Then, COVID hit, and I started to become close with my sister-in-law. We talked every day, and at some point, I opened up about our mother-in-law. To my shock, she told me that she had gone through the same thing. She, too, had to deal with the ex constantly being around, even during holidays. It was a wake-up call. I realized I was walking in her footsteps, and I wasn't going to deal with Sam for that long, especially not around my kids. In 2021, I became pregnant with my son. My husband and I were looking at renting a gazebo for the gender reveal, but my mother-in-law insisted we have it at her house to save money. Reluctantly, we agreed. But the title of this story gives away what happened next. She invited Sam. It ruined the event for both me and my husband. We spent the entire time focused on actual family and friends, trying to ignore her. I was also frustrated with Sam. How could she be so thick-skinned that she didn't realize we didn't want her there? After my sister-in-law told me that my mother-in-law was simply looking for a reaction, I felt like I was part of some twisted circus. A few months later, I was going to Lowe's to get supplies to build something for my son, and I felt a pang of guilt about the distance between me and my mother-in-law. So, I offered to pick up something for her from Lowe's. To my surprise, she said yes and asked for orchid mulch. When I brought her the mulch, I offered to help her plant the orchids. She coldly responded that she'd rather wait for Sam. 3 months later, those orchids were still sitting unplanted, waiting for Sam. Despite all this, my mother-in-law would complain to my husband that she barely saw our son. My husband suggested that she come to our apartment, but she refused, claiming that her asthma was aggravated by our AC unit. Giving her the benefit of the doubt, we started going to her house instead. One day, my husband was outside washing down the backyard, while I was inside trying to get our son to sleep. My mother-in-law seized the opportunity to corner me. She called me as fat as a cow, and said my husband would leave me for any woman who could cook and smile at him. I knew she was looking for a reaction, so I calmly told her that I could care less if he left. She was taken aback by my lack of response, and then accused me of having an affair because I clearly didn't care about my husband anymore. A few months later, I became pregnant with our daughter. We looked into gazebos for the gender reveal, but they were even more expensive than before. My mother-in-law offered her place again, but I declined. I'd rather not even have a gender reveal. She shamed me, saying I didn't love my daughter as much as my son. My husband finally told her the truth, that we didn't want to have the event at her house because she had invited Sam the last time. She replied, "Well, that's her fault that she's uncomfortable." When my husband suggested that she simply not invite Sam, she repeated the same line from years ago. "This is my house. I can invite whoever I want." We ended up doing a virtual gender reveal instead. She was livid that it didn't go her way. At this point, we only see them at Christmas, and they visit us once in a blue moon. A few months ago, my mother-in-law told my husband that she had grown to love me. My husband wants me to mend fences with her, but I'm tired, exhausted, actually, of trying. Should I really fix things with my monster-in-law? I spoke with my husband and expressed my concerns. I told him that he needed to keep his word and set boundaries with his mother. I explained that I didn't think it was healthy to have any kind of contact with her, given her consistent behavior over the past 7 years. His response? He told me to get over it, stop being stagnant, and leave the past in the past. The past. This was just a year ago. My daughter just turned 1 last month, and there would have been more drama if I had continued to engage with my mother-in-law. I tried to make him understand my fear that she would just wait until my guard was down and start her antics again. He insisted that he could see a change in her, though I had my doubts. He told me she claimed to have grown to love me because she saw the kind of mother I am. how I juggle work from home and take care of our kids. But I don't see that as a valid reason to suddenly grow to love someone. Love is earned through actions and genuine care, not out of some obligation or convenience. Sadly, I think I'll have to show him this post to make him truly understand my side of things. Maybe then, he'll finally open his eyes to the reality of the situation. Against my better judgment, I decided to give my mother-in-law another chance. When I arrived at her house, she greeted me with a big hug. But it felt forced and insincere. As she went to the kitchen to prepare some snacks, I followed her to help. That's when I overheard her talking to someone, laughing, and calling me stupid. She was bragging about how I had no idea that the cookies she was about to serve were from Sam. She didn't realize I was standing right behind her, and I managed to record the whole conversation on my phone. I left her house without saying a word, completely disgusted by her behavior. When I got home, my husband asked why I left abruptly. Apparently, my mother-in-law had already texted him, claiming that I was being spiteful and rude for leaving without permission. That's when I showed him the video. He was furious. He stormed outside, and I could hear him shouting at his mom, confronting her about everything. Meanwhile, I went upstairs and blocked her number because both she and Sam had started spamming me with messages. When my husband came back inside, he apologized, admitting that he should have known better. I don't blame him. My husband apologized, admitting that he should have known better. I don't blame him entirely. He's been caught in the crossfire between two important women in his life for years. But enough was enough. We had to set some hard boundaries if we were ever going to have peace. After my husband's confrontation with his mother, things got eerily quiet. My phone wasn't blowing up with her usual manipulative texts or passive-aggressive comments. At first, I thought she was giving us some space, but deep down, I knew she was plotting her next move. My instincts were right. A couple of weeks later, my husband came home from work looking troubled. He sat me down and told me that his mother had been spreading rumors about me to the extended family. She was telling anyone who would listen that I was trying to tear their family apart, that I was brainwashing my husband, and that I was preventing her from seeing her grandchildren. She even went so far as to say that I was mentally unstable and that my husband should leave me for the sake of the kids. I was furious but also heartbroken. How could she go so low? This wasn't just about petty insults anymore. This was character assassination. I could see the pain in my husband's eyes as he told me this. He didn't want to believe his own mother was capable of such venom, but the evidence was too clear. My husband made the difficult decision to cut contact with her entirely. He blocked her number, stopped answering her emails, and even left the family group chat. He wanted to protect our family and, most importantly, our children from the toxicity his mother was spreading. It was a tough decision, but we both knew it was the right one. The fallout was immediate. My mother-in-law went on a rampage, calling everyone in the family, sobbing and playing the victim. She twisted the story, making it seem like I was the one who had forced my husband to cut ties with her. Some of the family members believed her, but others saw through her manipulation. It was a dividing line. Those who supported us and those who sided with her. For the first time in a long while, our lives started to stabilize. The constant stress of dealing with my mother-in-law's antics was gone, and we could finally focus on our little family. My husband and I became closer than ever, and our kids were happier without the tension hanging over us. But of course, the peace didn't last long. One day, I received a letter in the mail. It was from my mother-in-law, and it was dripping with venom. She accused me of stealing her son, ruining her family, and even hinted that she would take legal action to get visitation rights to our children. It was clear she wasn't going to let this go. I showed the letter to my husband, and we decided to consult a lawyer. We wanted to make sure we were doing everything by the book, especially if she was serious about taking legal action. The lawyer advised us to keep a record of everything, every letter, every text, every voicemail, and to limit contact as much as possible. He assured us that it would be difficult for her to win any visitation rights, especially given her history of manipulation and emotional abuse. Over the next few months, we focused on healing. We started going to therapy to work through the trauma caused by my mother-in-law's behavior. My husband struggled with feelings of guilt and sadness, but he knew that cutting ties with her was necessary for our mental and emotional well-being. Then, out of the blue, We received an invitation to a family reunion. It was from one of my husband's aunts who had always been kind to us. The invitation made no mention of my mother-in-law, but we knew she would be there. My husband wanted to go. He missed his extended family and wanted to reconnect with them. I was hesitant, but I agreed for his sake. The day of the reunion, I was a bundle of nerves. I knew we were walking into the lion's den, but I wanted to support my husband. When we arrived, the atmosphere was tense. Some family members were warm and welcoming, while others gave us cold stares. And then, there she was, my mother-in-law, standing in the corner, watching us like a hawk. She didn't approach us right away, but I could feel her eyes on me the entire time. It was suffocating. We tried to enjoy the reunion, but the tension was too much to ignore. My husband and I stuck close to the family members who had supported us, avoiding any confrontation. Finally, towards the end of the reunion, my mother-in-law made her move. She approached us with a forced smile, acting as if nothing had happened. She tried to make small talk, but we weren't having it. My husband firmly told her that we weren't interested in rekindling a relationship with her unless she made genuine changes and took responsibility for her actions. She immediately dropped the act, her face contorting in anger. She started yelling, accusing me of turning her son against her, of ruining their family. The entire room went silent as she continued her tirade, not caring that everyone was watching. My husband calmly told her that this was exactly why we had distanced ourselves. Because of her inability to see her own faults and her constant need to blame others. She stormed out of the reunion, and I could feel the weight lifting off my shoulders. I knew then that we had made the right decision. The family members who had doubted us finally saw her true colors, and many of them apologized for not believing us sooner. In the weeks that followed, my mother-in-law continued to try to stir up trouble, but her influence was waning. More and more family members started to distance themselves from her, tired of her drama. She was becoming more isolated, and while part of me felt a twinge of pity for her, I knew we had to protect ourselves and our children from her toxicity. As time went on, the chaos she brought into our lives became a distant memory. My husband and I focused on building a happy, healthy environment for our kids. We surrounded ourselves with people who genuinely cared about us and supported our decisions. The scars from the past were still there, but they were healing. Looking back, I realized that standing up to my mother-in-law was one of the hardest things I had ever done, but it was also one of the most important. It taught me the value of setting boundaries and the importance of protecting my family from toxic influences. My husband and I came out of it stronger, more united, and more committed to each other and our children. And as for my mother-in-law, last I heard, she was still trying to meddle in other people's lives, but her power and influence were fading. She was no longer the looming shadow over our happiness, and we finally found the peace we had been searching for.